He's 90 years old, spoke out for persecuted Chinese Christians, and now Cardinal Joseph Zen faces life in prison. And what does Francis say in his defense? A major press conference next Saturday will formalize Catholic resistance against Pope Francis. Plus, war in Ukraine. Joe Biden's Secretary of State says Vladimir Putin must be stopped before he shreds the New World Order. With World War III on the line, maybe it's time for America to get real and turn back to God. Or not. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Michael Matt. This is the Remnant Underground. Next week, there will not be an Underground because we are going to be at the Catholic Identity Conference in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. This, of course, is the largest traditional Catholic conference of the year, as far as I know. It's really just it's a massive gathering of the clans. I'm so excited to see a lot of the folks that come back year after year. It's like a huge Catholic rendezvous. There's going to be 800 people in the house this year. I think we have 16 speakers, 30 vendors now. You know, some really interesting vendors. This year we picked up Pro-Life Across America. That's really exciting because those are the guys that do the billboards. I just want to walk up to that guy, whoever's responsible for those pro-life billboards, walk up and shake his hand because I can't tell you how many times driving across country with my own kids, you know, and you see these massive reminders on the side of freeways. Can't wait to meet those guys. The conference now, the Catholic Identity Conference, has been sold out for a long time, for several weeks, but we're really putting a lot of effort into the live stream. I know sometimes live stream can be a little tricky, a little touch and go, but our team really has worked on it. It's just been top notch for the last few years. We're going to do that again. Click the link below if you want to join us. The clans literally coming together by live stream is also so exciting. And as the MC, it's fun for me to kind of talk and communicate with people all around the world. We try to field a few emails and comments that come in from around the world, see if we can, have an interaction from the podium to all of you who are live streaming. So give that a thought. It really does help us a lot to know that you're all out there during the conference, and also financially. I think we're charging $25, whatever it is, $30, to just help to make sure this conference can just keep going and keep getting bigger and better every single year. So that's this coming weekend. I'm excited about it because it's going to be a big deal. We need to get together, we need to strategize, we need to brace for what's coming, I'm afraid to say. And, this is an opportunity to do that because things are getting a little strange. I don't need to tell you this. It's getting pretty weird out there in the world. Let's just think about these midterms. Remember when they were talking about the big red wave that was coming and we were just going to obliterate those Democrats come November, right? Looks like the wave has crested somewhere far out to sea. And I think it's important to think about what we're all facing, the lunacy of what we're facing right now. The Democrats are in charge. Yippee! The Democrats are in charge. They have control of everything. Aren't they doing a bang-up job so far? So let's review. The economy is in the toilet. The Dow has never seen such record lows, at least not in a long time. The borders are wide open. Every manner of criminal just coming across, helping himself to whatever he can get over on this side. Open borders. Crime, therefore, is through the roof. Good luck with those heating bills this winter. Out in California, where the Democrats rule, they've promised to take your car away by 2030. So that you can basically drive around in one great big crappy cell phone on wheels pretty soon, just a few years from now, that they can monitor and track and shut off remotely, and you're going to be perpetually looking for one of those charge stations.
So literally at 11:30 in the morning on a Saturday, you got to sit in line to charge this thing. This is crazy.
All of this is coming, out of control crazy, and yet, polls show a tight race in November because there's just no vaccine for stupid. Vote for us and we're going to lock you up. We're going to take away your car. We're going to abuse your children in the classroom. Get out the vote. And people go for it, friends. This is insanity. This is crazy. That's what's happening to this country and all over the world. How do you change that? Well, we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight because it's not easy to do, but obviously it's time for a change. And in the church, of course, things aren't much better. The bishops of Belgium just approved a right for the blessing of homosexual unions in their church, in their country. Pope Francis seems perfectly fine with that. At least he hasn't objected yet. Well, he's busy, cracking down on traditional Catholics. Maybe he'll get to the Belgians. I don't know. But obviously, church law now means nothing. Like the Constitution of the United States, the law of the church, the catechisms of the Catholic Church mean nothing anymore. And you have good bishops, good shepherds, a few left, like Cardinal Joseph Zen of Hong Kong, who's in jail in China, communist China, got arrested on bogus charges that could earn the 90-year-old cardinal a life sentence. We're going to find out in a few weeks here. His trial's coming. It's been delayed, but it's coming in a couple of weeks. And so far, while this 90-year-old cardinal rots in prison in communist China, we got what from Francis? Crickets. You got nothing. Finally, a reporter pressed him on the flight back from Kazakhstan, and Francis was asked directly, what about Cardinal Zen? And the Pope of Mercy said, well, Cardinal Zen, he says what he feels, right? Despite knowing there are limitations. Oh, there are limitations. Is that what you're trying to say, Holiness? Fantastic. So the 90-year-old Cardinal Zen just sort of had it coming, right, Francis? Oh, merciful one. And then you compare that sort of mob boss bully in Rome to Cardinal Zen himself, who's a real Catholic bishop, a real Catholic shepherd, and he's enduring his persecution at the hands of the communist Chinese that Francis is uniting with and signing deals with. Cardinal Zen is enduring that persecution like a true saint. Martyrdom is normal in our church, said Zen right after his arrest. We may not have to go through it, but we may certainly have to bear some pain and steel ourselves for persecution, for our loyalty to our faith. 90-year-old Cardinal Zen. And Francis says, well, there's limitations, what you can say, bud. Ease back a little bit, And of course, Zen is no stranger to the insides of prisons, because as opposed to Francis, who likes to talk about going to the peripheries, whatever that means for him, Zen actually does do that. He actually is known for going into the prisons, communist Chinese prisons, to talk to prisoners, to people who've been put there unjustifiably, who are locked up, locked away. That's what he does as part of his ministry. The 90-year-old Cardinal Zen. He's been visiting political prisoners for years. One of those political prisoners, in fact, is the Chinese billionaire and the founder now of Apple Daily, Jimmy Lai, whom Cardinal Joseph Zen baptized into the Catholic faith 20 years ago. And no surprise here, Jimmy Lai knows exactly what's going wrong with the Vatican as well.
Being a Catholic, you have the instinct to stand up for what is wrong. Vatican cannot forsake the believer who look for its virtue and moral power for the raw power of material. And this is where the Pope has gone wrong.
Now, Jimmy Lai, he's been also in a Chinese communist prison since December for taking part in unauthorized rallies, sort of like the ones that Cardinal Zen is accused of having financed illegally. Unauthorized rallies, in other words, against communism, against atheism, in favor of democracy. But of course, they shouldn't talk about those things, says Francis. There are limits. Careful, you see.
Jimmy's jailing has rightly provoked global condemnation. There's one place where China's bullying elicits only silence: the Vatican. So at the moment Jimmy and his family most need their shepherd, Pope Francis is nowhere to be seen.
So now both of these men, these Catholic men, face life in prison. So it's happening all around us, friends. It's really pretty crazy to deny it, not only in far-off China, but it's also happening. Remember the way that things were coming down here in Canada just last year? Pretty similar to what's happening in China. You remember this.
Pastor James Coates was arrested and sent to prison a couple of weeks ago in Canada. What did he do? He held a church service. Coates was denied bail.
So whether we're talking up in Canada or we're talking in China, in the States, Catholics, including the 90-year-old cardinals of the Catholic Church, getting rounded up and sent to the gulag once again, just like the bad old days of the Cold War, only this time, nobody's home in Rome. Nobody cares. According to Cardinal Mueller, not one bishop even mentioned the imprisoned Cardinal Zen at last month's bishops' conference in Rome. Well, that's because they were too busy listening. You see, the synod on synodality is coming up. That's really important. It's really beautiful. They're listening to people and everything. So we're I suppose they didn't have time to think about Cardinal Zen rotting away in prison when they were so busy listening. All of this, friends, all of it stacks up for reason why we need to do something. So this coming Saturday, there's going to be a press conference at the Catholic Identity Conference, which is going to formalize Catholic resistance against Pope Francis. So write it down. We need some prayers for this. We need some support. You can join us by live stream. October 1st, 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time. It's going to be live streamed as part of the Catholic Identity Conference. And here's why. Because the situation that we all face now is really beyond urgent. And I know when you talk about resisting the Holy Father, we have a whole segment of traditional Catholics, the Sedevacantists, who began school-marming us all about how you can't resist him if he's the Pope and all of these technicalities and theological ins. And that's for you guys. That's your deal. You go right ahead and have fun with that. All I know as a Catholic journalist is that looking at what's happening right now in Rome, look what's happening in the world, in my city, in our church, we have to resist. So your little theological disputes, carry on, guys. Just carry on. But we're actually going to resist Francis to his face. And that's between us and God and Francis. Because the problem is, this guy is a globalist plant. He's an operative. He has no intention whatsoever of defending even persecuted Christians, Catholics such as Cardinal Zen, 90 years old, rotting away in prison. Francis can't be bothered to say anything. He's already complicit, Francis is, with those who incite violence against Christians on purpose. Remember Canada? After he was in Canada, he's taking the plane back and he talks about what the Catholic Church did up in Canada, the missionaries, remember? He accused them of cultural genocide. They committed cultural genocide. This is right after there were like 160 churches burned to the ground in Canada because of the little Indian kids that supposedly were slaughtered by the nuns and the church and the priests up in Canada. And Francis comes in and confirms all that. So he's not going to stand. He's not going to defend you. He's going to serve you up. He's going to throw you under the bus if you're a practicing rigorous Catholic, as he calls us all. And he has to be held accountable. He has to be held accountable for that. He has to be held accountable for his part in the crimes against humanity that were the global lockdowns that closed the churches, that put kids out of school, that forced vaccinations on people who did not need or want them, all of which was part of the Great Reset that Francis is fully on board with. And he's not done. Last week in Kazakhstan, Francis was calling for more of the same.
In a word, the sense of shared vulnerability that emerged during the pandemic should motivate us to move forward, but not as we did before, but now with greater humility and foresight. Believers in a post-pandemic world are called to care for humanity in all its aspects by becoming artisans of communion, witnesses of a cooperation that transcends the confines of our community, ethnic, national, and religious affiliations. We begin by listening to the poor, by giving a voice to the voiceless, by bearing witness to a global solidarity concerned above all for them, the poor and the needy, who suffered most from the pandemic, which so forcefully brought out the injustice of global inequalities and imbalances.
Now that's just a bald-faced lie, of course. Poor people didn't suffer more because of COVID. Where's he getting this from? Remember what happened to the middle class during COVID? Remember what happened to small businesses? Now, how many poor people do you know who own businesses and lost them, and lost their lives, lost their livelihood, lost their homes, turned to drugs and alcohol and suicide and everything else over the course of the past couple of years? How many cops do you know who are destitute and on the peripheries? Yet, how many cops lost their jobs? How many nurses lost their jobs? How many kids in suburban middle-class schools devastated by the lockdowns that Francis blessed and approved? And now that people are dropping like flies all over the world, Francis is still out there telling everyone to vax up. You see my point? You think I'm going to sit here and have a little theological debate about the levels of resistance I'm allowed to have in the eyes of God against a man like this? Francis is out of control. Even though in Kazakhstan, he was fully on point, at least in his own mind.
May we never justify violence. May we never allow the sacred to be exploited by the profane. The sacred must never be a prop for power, nor power.
Just yawning right through the whole thing. One is tempted. If it weren't so serious, I think we would all yawn through whatever it is Francis is trying to say these days. But while he's putting the world to sleep, his counterpart, the other Catholic guy over here in the States, well, he's walking in his sleep, evidently.
Mr. President, thank you. At the end of such a momentous event, the word thank you seems kind of inadequate. But for all the millions whose lives will be saved, for the communities where life will be transformed, thank you. So thank you, President Biden, for your outstanding...
Lunatic Catholics literally running the asylum. And the asylum in this case is the most powerful country in the world. The lunatic Catholic recklessly calling all pro-life patriotic Americans dangerous extremists. Remember?
Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic.
So these pro-life extremists threaten the very foundations of our republic, so says Joey the Catholic Biden. So it's really no wonder then, right, that this Biden voter, 41-year-old nutjob, intentionally ran down this 18-year-old kid with his 2003 Ford Explorer last week, just hit him head on in the street, smeared him, killed him, wiped him out. And do you know why? Because, as he told the North Dakota Highway Patrol, well, the kid was a Republican extremist. Just like the president said. And as such, the kid's a threat to our democracy. So he's a threat to this lunatic's bastard children, to his way of life. So it becomes a matter of self-defense to take them out with your 2003 Ford Explorer. Because it's open season on such dangerous extremists, evidently, because the president's doing nothing to stop you from taking them out. He's encouraging it. That's the world in which we live. That's the world in which you say, where are all the adults? Where's the moral authority? Where are the priests and bishops? Where's the Pope when you have this going on in the most enlightened land of the free, home of the brave country of in the world? Well, speaking for Pope Francis, he's over there in Rome doing the exact same thing. He's also accusing millions of his own of extremism, of being rigorous, fundamentalists who are dangerous, backwards people who divide everyone else and who threaten terrorism all throughout the world because of their fundamentalism. See, that's Francis. Traditional Catholics, he says, reject Vatican II, which is a sin because Vatican II did away with the church's extremely dangerous racism and extremism of the past, you see. So, traditional Catholics, you are dangerous extremists. So this isn't just a Catholic problem anymore. This is for everybody. These men are a clear and present danger and threat to the common good. Francis is the most recognized Christian leader in the world. And right now, he's dismantling the largest Christian denomination. I know a lot of people don't like the word denomination, but for the sake of the discussion, the largest Christian denomination in the world. What happens to Christianity once Catholicism is completely taken down by this man? Because the church is already on life support. Everybody knows that. The churches are closed all over the place. The Catholic schools are shuttered. Catholic nuns are gone. Just this past Wednesday, in fact, in Cross Plains, Wisconsin, leaders from the Diocese of Madison, which I remember all growing up, it's a diocese very close to here, had been a very Catholic diocese, right? Well, leaders of that diocese met, according to the Macabre News Service, and they met to work out how to shut down 70 of their 102 churches over the course of the next 5 years. And why are they shutting down 70 of their 102 churches? Because only 32,000 Catholics out of 138,000 Catholics, registered Catholics, are still showing up for Mass on Sunday. You see what's happening in the Catholic Church? They've completely turned off the Catholic people. They're leaving in droves. They've had enough. That's 80% of Catholics have walked away from the Catholic Church. They've rejected the new Mass. They've rejected Vatican II, the Church of Accompaniment. They don't give a damn about Pope Francis and his Church of Accompaniment. And those numbers, like we're seeing here in flyover land, those numbers are astronomically worse if you go over to Europe. Nobody's bothering going to Mass over there except for traditional Catholics. Why? Because the world got the message, for one thing. Religious services are not essential. Remember, religion is not essential. Many of these people simply never came back after COVID because their priests, their bishops, and their popes said, yeah, you know what? Religion isn't essential. God's not essential. They got the message. So Francis just sat back there, big globalist, crime boss, mob boss. He just sat back there and let his globalist friends and allies like Bill Gates and Klaus Schwab, all these guys, let them just shut down every single church in the world for about 2 years. And when that nightmare was over, Francis immediately got busy shutting down the few churches that had survived COVID, out in the parking lots, the ones run by the traditional Catholic priests. He's shutting them down, taking them down. Let this sink in, friends. Remember how this started? It wasn't with the traditional Latin Mass. Francis decided he was going to ban all private Masses celebrated in St. Peter's, Basilica of St. Peter's. This is a couple of years ago now. What for? Unity. He's got a problem with the Mass. He has a problem with the act of worshiping God. He declared war on traditional Catholics, those dangerous extremists. Right? You get it? This guy is overseeing the worldwide cancellation of Christianity's largest denomination, if you will. And the question is, why is he doing it? Because you don't have to be a Christian to be saved. Obviously, that's what he thinks. In Kazakhstan just last week, he boldly admitted this by signing the Kazakhstan Congress Declaration, which says, and I'm quoting, pluralism and differences in religion are expressions of the wisdom of God's will in creation. Translation, heresy is an expression of the wisdom of God's will in creation. And Francis goes on, quote, any incident of coercion to a particular religion and religious doctrine is unacceptable, end quote. See what's happening there? Don't you dare even suggest that your religion is the one true religion founded by God. Because that's rigorous and extremist. That's dangerously extremist. In other words, the world does not need Christianity. And if the world does not need Christianity by name, the world does not need Christ. We are looking at the first officially Christophobic pope in the history of the church. Because according to Francis, the world needs a brotherhood of man, a new world order of social justice and solidarity for all. That's what he says. So consequently then, when you move into geopolitics, which is right where Francis wants to be, pretty much every day now he's out there tweeting, shout tweeting, stop the war in Ukraine, stop the war in Ukraine, right? So we stop the war against the Ukrainian people, right? As if somehow Pope Francis is ignorant of what's really going on here with Mr. Green T-shirt Zelensky and his government shelling the hell out of civilian areas in Donbass region and blaming Russia for it and continuing to do the same thing they've been doing for years and years and years, right? Just stop those nasty Russians, shouts Francis every day. While his little buddy, Joe the Catholic Biden, pours billions of your tax dollars into escalating that war against Russia, NATO's war against Russia,
Putin is making nuclear threats. Whatever the reason he is making them, the fact he is making them, and the Ukrainians, of course, are also making explicit nuclear threats, is enough for any responsible person to say, now we stop. Especially if that person is the leader of the United States, the country which is funding this war and that could end this war tonight by calling Ukraine to the table. Russian troops leave. Ukraine promises not to join NATO. Everything is as it was in January of this year, and everything's fine. We don't have to worry about New York getting nuked. But that's not what they want. So Joe Biden didn't say a word about America's responsibility here. Again, we are funding this war. We could end it. They're choosing not to. He didn't say a word about that at the United Nations, of course, because they want war.
Why is this happening? Friends, really, seriously, we have to put our heads together, right? Stop being deceived. Stop falling for the distractions. I'm destroyed because Queen Elizabeth died too. But we're moving on now. I mean, they really put that on heavy, didn't they? We had to just mourn the passing of the Queen while all of this was going on, while World War III is getting ready. That's what you call media manipulation. So let's just think about this for a second. Us. What's happening in Ukraine? Obama, Barack Obama's former vice president, has been ordered to continue the agenda that Barack Obama and his neocon buddies like John McCain and Lindsey Graham started back in 2014, okay? This is Obama we're talking about. This is Vice President of Obama. This is Joe Biden, okay? Now, Biden is being ordered to blow Russia off the face of the earth for standing directly in the way of the New World Order. You don't have to look at Russia and say, oh, praise to holy Russia, Putin's a saint. That's not the point. Whatever you think of Russia, whatever you think of Putin, he's standing in the way of the New World Order right now. And that's what you're looking at. That's why they're so ticked off, right? That's why they want billions of dollars from us to fight a proxy war against Russia, to get Russia either out of the way or fully on board with the Great Reset. They're in a panic because Putin, like him or not, is disrupting the Great Reset, friends. Don't listen to what the folks on TV are talking about. This is a conspiracy theory, right? It's a dangerous conspiracy theory. YouTube's going to let you know now. It's a conspiracy theory. Don't listen. I don't hear anything. Nope. That's what they want.
Okay, good. Put the village behind her.
How about some screaming?
Screaming's good.
Some sound of screaming?
In front. We've just received information that the young Albanian national fleeing in this video is attempting to escape terrorist reprisals in her village.
But if you open your eyes and you pay attention to what's actually going on in the real world, after now they've interred the Queen, maybe we can start looking at what's really happening. They're admitting what's happening. They're admitting it on the floor of the United Nations just last week. Here's what they said.
President Putin picked this week, as most of the world gathers at the United Nations, to add fuel to the fire that he started, shows his utter contempt for the UN Charter, for the General Assembly, and for this Council. The very international order that we have gathered here to uphold is being shredded before our eyes. We cannot, we will not allow President Putin to get away with it.
The international order is being shredded by Putin. And did you see who's sitting right behind him? Right behind Tony Blinken, on the floor of the UN? Victoria Nuland, sitting right behind, Barack Obama's Assistant Secretary of State for European Affairs. Victoria. You remember Victoria, don't you? Here, let me refresh your memory.
In early February of 2014, as the Maidan crisis was getting more violent, there was a phone call that was intercepted. It was a call between the Assistant Secretary of State for European Affairs, Victoria Nuland, and the U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Jeffrey Pyatt.
Questions of credibility are being raised after a private chat between two top U.S. diplomats was leaked online.
I think Yats is the guy who's got the economic experience, the governing experience. He's the guy, what he needs is Klitsch and Tony Book on the outside. I just think Klitsch going in, he's going to be at that level working for Yatsenyuk. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Okay. Good. Well, do you want us to try to set up a call with him as the next step?
Sullivan's come back to me, VFR, saying you need Biden, and I said probably tomorrow for an attaboy and to get the deets to stick. So Biden's willing.
So you had this remarkable phone call where you have these two senior officials of the U.S. government apparently talking about a coup, or how they were planning to restructure the government of Ukraine.
Am I claiming to be an expert on all of this? An expert on what really happened? Absolutely not, friends. But as we've been saying for a long time, if you got Obama and Biden and Francis and the UN and Nancy Pelosi all telling you the same narrative, you got to be real careful before you believe it. Because the truth is, in Ukraine right now, the truth, the actual truth in Ukraine is like ivermectin during COVID, remember? You weren't allowed to talk about that. You weren't allowed to hear about that. Mention ivermectin, you could get taken down from YouTube, taken down off Facebook. The only news you get, friends, is exactly the news they want you to get.
America has seldom witnessed a more poignant picture of the human race than that which armed conflict
Fantastic.
Great.
That was good.
They used the same process with the last Schwarzenegger movie.
Fantastic. Isn't that amazing how they do that?
You know? If you don't believe that there's more to this story, try posting this on Facebook. Just back from the site of a Ukrainian massacre today, just after noon, Western Donetsk, tweets Canadian independent journalist Ava Karine Bartlett. It was horrific. Chunks of flesh littered the street, 10 meters from the mangled bodies still lying there. Part of a hand lay on the road, also a foot. 13 killed in the area, 9 where I saw an older woman's body, only the upper half. This is pure Ukrainian terrorism. Nowhere is safe in Donetsk. Now, I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, well, it's Russian propaganda, man. You got to be careful. Yeah, okay. But you know from the past 2 years that we're all subject to propaganda, just from a different place. Right? So that was Russian propaganda from a Canadian journalist? A Canadian independent journalist? Do you remember when COVID was just getting started? It was the independent journalists who were sneaking into hospitals to tell us what was really going on with COVID patients and overcrowding, remember? They turned out to be right, didn't they? So maybe this is Russian propaganda. But are you sure? Your facts are coming right from the same people who brought you Tony from the land of baloney, Fauci, and the mRNA vax. Right? And now everyone's lining up behind the new science, right? Don't question the science, only now it's political science. The political science in Ukraine, the science that you can't question, according to every whacked out globalist from Francis to Schwab to Biden. I'm not telling you what to believe. I'm telling you to question everything you're being told. Guess who you're going to believe? Some Canadian independent journalist with cameras running on the ground in the Donbass region? Or Hunter's dad here?
Mr. President.
So that's the guy that's giving you your facts. You're trusting that guy's version of what's really going on in the Ukraine. Well, I hope you're right. Because he's sending billions of your tax dollars to this guy, Mr. Greenshirt. So Mr. Greenshirt can wage war on Russia in our name and really, really tick off an extremely powerful country, Russia. And the trouble is, we've gone too far now. Russia's not going to back down. Russia's building up troops. There's a story out that Putin pulled up a million regular soldiers now. He's waiting for something. Something's going to happen here. And they're getting ready for war. Or we're trying to decide what pronouns to use.
Putin attended the Vostok 2022 maneuvers that are being held in the training grounds in Russia's Far East and in the waters off its eastern coast. The Russian leader met Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu and Military Chief of Staff as he observed the final phase of the military drills. Along with China, the week-long war games also include countries like Syria, India, and many ex-Soviet nations.
Now, am I saying, isn't that fantastic? Isn't that great? No, that looks pretty scary. Do you know what that looks like to me? We're the ones pushing. We're pushing this. We've been pushing it for a long time. If you do a little research, you'll find that out. Barack Obama was pushing this war a long time ago. Now Biden is. And you know what it's developing into? Well, you know the answer to that. To me, it looks like we're looking at the instruments of a divine chastisement in the making. We're looking at Armageddon. We're looking at potentially a world war like we've never ever seen before. I think I'm looking forward to that. Where are we going to hide if all the adults don't, at some point, come back to the room? We're going to hide in our churches. That's what Cardinal Zen thought. Hide in the churches. That's working out pretty well. He's in prison still, and Francis doesn't care. So maybe we're going to turn to God finally. God going to save us? Right. At the moment, here in America, half of our politicians are campaigning for November's midterm elections on demanding that we protect women's right to kill their babies here in America. That's the number one issue for these people. While the other half, the good half, the Karl Rove Republican rhino half, they're campaigning on, well, not all the babies. We just want to kill the really, really little ones. That's what we're facing right now. You think God's going to step in and save us? We're the virtuous country and Vladimir Putin is the evil guy? And God's going to save us? We kicked God out of our schools a long time ago. When I was a child, we kicked him out of our schools, which means we kicked him out of our lives. And we let demons have at our kids ever since. And this is what the demons look like now.
I teach my elementary school students about gender identity. I teach my students that there's a whole spectrum of gender identities and that everyone, whatever their gender, deserves love and respect. Some people are girls, some are boys, some are both, some are neither.
You know, I had selected a video clip for that segment, which was, it was just too disheartening to even play. It was a clip of little children, 6, 7-year-old children, in a circle around a stripper in a thong and a top, bikini top, transgender stripper, bouncing around in front of the kids, these little kids, 5, 6-year-olds. And this little boy's trying to hand her a $10 bill. And the parents are, what's going to happen to that little kid, do you suppose? What's going to happen to these kids? This is what we're doing. And we have ourselves on some sort of a pedestal that we're the holy ones, that we're the holy avengers, that we're the holy crusaders. They're not doing this to Russian kids. And you look at something that you got to think about the propaganda that we're getting. When you see what they're doing to kids in libraries and in schools, to say nothing of abortion, to say nothing of hacking off their private parts or giving them drugs to turn little boys into little girls and little girls into little... You see all of this? And then you sit down and you say, gee, isn't Vladimir Putin a bad guy? Putin is your enemy? You see how they got inside your head? You say climate change is going to kill the planet? That's what we got to do, get electric cars to save the planet while we're doing this to little children and slaughtering millions of babies per year? Climate change is the problem. Russia's the problem. They told us on TV. Do you see what's happening here to us? We got to make a decision, friends. We got to get serious. You know what? God is real. He's just waiting for us to turn back to him. We got to stop treating God like the tooth fairy and sincerely go back to him and demand it of our politicians, our conservative politicians, to also beg the return of God to our politics, to our schools, to our churches, Francis. And we as the little people, we got a choice to make. In our own homes, make that proclamation to Christ the King. In our own lives, choose between Christ or chaos. What's it going to be? Choose between God and Satan. What's it going to be? Peace or Armageddon? There might still be time, friends, to change course if enough of us make the right choices. I don't know, maybe. But what's for sure is that we are on the wrong road now. This whole civilization, since we turned against God, turned against his church, is on the road to perdition. It can only lead to the chastisement, a chastisement of our world, of our nations, of biblical proportions. Remember, Our Lady of Fatima, nations will be annihilated if we don't make the right choice here. Or maybe when our nation is annihilated, maybe then we'll finally turn back to God. In that instant, just before we go. So in the meantime, before that happens, what do? The whole point, writes Lauren Oliver, the whole point, the only point, is to find the things that matter and hold on to them and fight for them and refuse to let them go. On this show, we say it every single week. God, family, country, the only things that matter, and in that order. Hold on to them, fight for them, never let them go. And maybe, just maybe, we've still got a chance. Fail to do that? Well, it sure as hell isn't going to matter what pronouns you use ever again. I'm Michael Matt for Remnant TV. Thanks for listening. I look forward to seeing you all either live or by live stream next weekend at the Catholic Identity Conference. God bless you all.